Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Sports with Tonsoni. I'm your host, Bryan Tonsoni, and this is a Delphi Bracketolgy production here. We have a special guest with us, Mauro from Nebraska. But before we do, I'd like to again share with all our listeners Project 44 at Butler University for a bone marrow transplant list for Andrew Smith, the center from Butler who lost his life to leukemia. His wife, Samantha, and the great people at Butler are trying to get people to register to save lives, and it's already working. So if you feel so inclined, please check out Project 44. Be the Match is the national registry, and if we can help save lives, that would be awesome. So here's Bryan. Introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name's Mauro. Like Bryan said, I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was born in Omaha, so I am a huge Nebraska fan, really all sports. I write for the fan-sided site Busting Brackets. You can see me covering a lot of the Big Ten. I do the Horizon League, some Summit League, and a little bit of the Big 12 every once in a while, but usually the Big Ten and the Horizon League and a little bit of the Summit. And I kind of will do it for the rest of the NCAA too if I feel so inclined. So I've been writing for Busting Brackets not too long, since July, but I also do some other blogging projects on the side that we'll get into later. And I've been doing that for about 2 years total.
Well, Bryan, we're glad that we met up on Twitter and get this chance to talk. We had a very interesting talk before we recorded, and this is a solid person. And so I'm interested to hearing what you say. We're going to start off with talking about just conference tourney time in general. They're on our television here. The Big Ten tournament started. But overall, what are you interested in seeing in the conference tourney these next 2 weeks?
So for me, to be honest with you, because coming from the Big Ten, and I know that tournament's in New York, I think that's a horrible idea, first of all. I also noticed that the ACC tournament's in New York, which makes absolutely zero sense to me at all. And the SEC tournament's in St. Louis, which, again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I just want to see how those kind of go. And also, because of me being a Nebraska fan, I'm going to put my heart, where it needs to be. And I'm hoping that there's a lot of chalk in the conference tournaments, let's just say that, and not a lot of bid steals and upsets. So.
Yeah, as a Nebraska fan and a bracketologist, they've had a solid season, but they need to get some quality wins, and they don't need other people on the bubble to get quality wins, because it's going to be a little bit tough for them. But they're not disqualified yet. They're still being considered. So that leads us to our first. Let's go to the conference tournaments. We're going to talk Horizon tournament, and that's a smaller tournament, but it's been a really good tournament lately, and it used to be Butler and Valpo. I attended that tournament a few years back, and then they've moved on to different conferences. Last year's tournament was a lot of upsets. Talk a little bit about what we can expect in the Horizon conference tournament.
You could see the same thing again, but the problem is that Northern Kentucky is so much, like, the talent level of that team is so much greater than the rest of the Horizon League. So I don't think that anyone else besides Northern Kentucky is going to win it. But the two teams maybe that potentially could win it, well, there's three really, but I don't really know if Wright State is as big a threat as they showed in the regular season. I just think they got hot there for a little bit. I don't think that they have what it would take to win the tournament. But I will say that Oakland, never count out Oakland, because they do have this a prolific offense led by Kendrick Nunn from Illinois. They don't play a lick of defense, though, so that is probably why they're seated where they are. Northern Kentucky, if you've read Busting Brackets, I gush about Northern Kentucky a lot. I really like them. Drew McDonald, their center, I think got robbed for the Player of the Year. He should have gotten the Player of the Year, but it's hard not to give it to a guy that averaged 30 points a game most of the year in the Horizon League. But Drew McDonald paired with Levon Holland and Jalen Tate, that's a nice little trio there. They can score, they defend, they rebound well. There's really not a weakness they have. The problem is that, as we all know with bracketology, they say they don't look at conference RPI, but Northern Kentucky didn't really fare too well in non-conference. So they're not going to be a super high seed. I'm saying probably maybe a 15. And you could probably fill me in on more about that. But if they do, keep in mind that they're a big team. They're a team that not a lot of teams are going to want to play. They played Kentucky last year in their first appearance ever and took Kentucky to the wire. They actually lost by 9, but the game was a lot closer than that. And another team that I think everyone kind of needs to keep an eye on, just because of the story, is Illinois Chicago. They have a deep roster with talented kids, but their star, Dikembe Dixon, said last week that out of the blue he was transferring, and no one really knows why. They were putting it together. I was gonna pick them to probably win the tournament, but I don't know how it's gonna go with Dikembe transferring, and all the players know that. So it could go one of two ways. Either one, they could tank and lose their first game, or two, they could kind of rise up and get to the tournament for Dikembe. But that's an interesting story, and we'll see what happens. And just so you all know, for those of you that are looking at transfers, Dikembe Dixon is going to not be on the transfer market very long. The kid can score. He's lanky. He's a wing. He is really, really good.
Is he still playing?
Yeah.
He announced his intention to transfer. Is it a graduate transfer situation or just a transfer?
It's just a transfer. It came out. He posted it on Twitter before he even told the team, apparently.
Wow.
So he told them that senior day at their arena, he said senior day at the Flame Center, which is where they play, would be his last time in a UIC uniform at home, because his intention was to transfer.
Here's an interesting. Go ahead.
He was out last year he tore his ACL last year, like the 8th game of the year. He was averaging 32 a game last year when he tore his ACL. So he came back this year and started really slow, but now he's starting to score, 24, 25 a game again. So it's just a really strange deal. That
is weird. Here's a weird connection to Northern Kentucky, where I teach school, Delphi. We had Cole Murray played on Northern Kentucky last year, and I think was the only senior who graduated off that NCAA tournament team. So Northern Kentucky had 4 starters coming back, and it sounds like they were able to maintain that success last year.
Yeah, they're good. I mean, they're pretty good. They've lost I'm in the camp that it's really hard to go undefeated in your conference, regardless of how good you are. I mean, East Tennessee State, they're the best team in that conference by far, and they lost 3 games. Florida Gulf Coast lost a game, and they don't have any competition in their conference. So it's just – even Bucknell, who may have literally the most lopsided conference of all time, they lost 2 games. I still can't figure out how, because that conference is bad this year. But they lost 2 games because I don't think anyone's going to go undefeated ever.
Bryan, that's an excellent point, too, because some of these conferences you play round robin, you play each team twice, but these coaches generally know each other, and despite turnover and a new coach coming in. You know the style of play. You know how they've played for a year or two as long as the coach has been there. And if you play them twice, it's kind of hard, even if you are a dominant team, to go undefeated. Let's move on to the Missouri Valley, and we're meeting for the first time. My son is a manager for the men's basketball team at Indiana State. They're the 6th seed, and will be starting play on Friday. And the Missouri Valley has lost some top teams. Wichita State left this year to go to the American Conference, and so that has opened up this conference. And there's one dominant team and then a bunch of teams I think that might be able to. What are your thoughts on the Missouri Valley?
This is another one, too. I have some sleepers in here, but Loyola Chicago is pretty good. And I don't think they're pretty good like Northern Kentucky is pretty good just in their conference. I mean, I generally think Loyola Chicago is pretty good. And I would say that if you saw them on the other end of your bracket in the tournament, that probably is not going to be a great matchup for you. I mean, they already beat Florida this year.
At Florida.
Yeah, they beat them there. They've just they've never really had a lull. I didn't really buy into it when they were undefeated for like 15-0. They didn't play anybody. Then they beat Florida, and I was starting to get a little bit into it. And then the Missouri Valley doesn't have bad. I mean, it doesn't have the talent's down, but it's not terrible. But Loyola Chicago dominated that league all year. So it's kind of them. But some sleepers that I have, I'm a big Drake guy. Mm-hmm. I like Nico Medved a lot, and I don't think he'll be at Drake very long, to be honest with you. that's what he has done with Drake this year to get them to the 4 seed after last year just being dreadful. I mean, they were terrible last year. Is impressive, and the league. I still don't think that UNI and Missouri State are this bad. I don't. I mean,
and they're in the play-in games, and they were favored at the beginning of the year to lead the conference, and they've had some struggles. So they're going to have to win 4 to get out.
Yeah, Indiana State's one of them teams, as you know, if you ask any Indiana fan out there, that they can make it rain from outside. So if they're hitting shots, they're going to be an awful tough team to beat.
There's some good players in the Missouri Valley, and being able to go down and watch Indiana State play and see 4 or 5 teams come in there from the Valley, there's some great individuals to watch if you have a chance to get them on television. So I agree. I think Loyola is the team to watch, and I think they might get an 11 seed. And move ahead of some of the bubble teams and force those play-in games to be 12 seed games, because I think Middle Tennessee and Nevada and those teams are automatic qualifiers, but they're going to move up a little bit. And so Loyola 11-6 is going to be a good matchup. If they're a 12-13 playing a 5, that 12-5 matchup, which we always tell people to pick a couple of those upsets. Look for the Loyola Ramblers if they get through the conference. Let's go.
They're just on Loyola really quick. They're one of those teams that you don't want to see, but they're also one of those teams like Belmont who can be shut down because they're really reliant on one guy, but that one guy happens to be really, really good. So it's really hard to shut them down. Hey,
this isn't on the script, but did you catch any of the St. Bonaventure-Davidson game, 3 overtime game?
I did watch that last night, yeah.
My goodness, there were some players. Davidson had a couple guys go for over 30, and Jalen Adams for St. Bonaventure. And Bryan, as a bracketologist, I look at the data, the wins, and the criteria of the committee. I would love to see them set aside 2 slots, 4 slots for some mid-majors that have good years but just don't have those opportunities, because it would be a shame if for some reason a St. Bonaventure – I think St. Mary's is on the bubble, and that with Landau's
that's their own fault, though. That's their own fault, though.
I agree. I agree.
At
Go
least
schedule some people.
St. Bonaventure at least played people.
Same with Gonzaga.
Yeah, St. Mary's they refuse, and they've told Randy Bennett before why he doesn't get in, but he just refuses to ever leave the state of California. He won't do it. So
do you think they're going to get in? They have 1 win on the road at Gonzaga.
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say. That Gonzaga win's a good win.
That's the only one they have.
Nebraska win over Michigan. That's a really good win at this point. But Nebraska was literally 2 seconds away from being in the tournament field now, because if Steve Mikhailuk doesn't hit that shot and they end up beating Kansas, then we're not having a discussion about them being in.
Right.
But St. Mary's, they lost to San Francisco at home. Yeah. So as much as I want to say, they beat Gonzaga on the road, that's fine. But Gonzaga punked you in your own building. You got punked by Gonzaga in your own building. And San Francisco beat you. You can't lose. The West Coast Conference is bad. Okay, outside of Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and most of the time BYU is bad. Which is why people are like, oh, BYU is 24-6 or whatever they are, 24-7. I was like, yeah. And they've lost 7 games in that conference, which is bad. Because Gonzaga beat them twice, St. Mary's beat them twice, but I think they lost to Pacific and potentially San Diego or San Francisco, one of the 2 teams they should not have lost to.
Let me again, we're going a little bit off script here, but this is all right. Let me throw you this scenario. There are 32 automatic qualifiers. I would say put 32 at large to get to 64, and then save 4 spots for non-Power 6 teams. So, for example, let's say Loyola is not one of your best 32 at large. They come in at 34, and they lose their tournament. Loyola deserves to be in. And I'd rather see Loyola than the 8th or 9th team from the ACC or the SEC who's 7-11 or 8-10 in their tournament. And those 4 spots would go through the same selection process of RPI wins, quadrant 1 wins, but you can take regular season conference champions that lose, that are guaranteed in the NIT. You could give them one of those 4 berths, or you could, if you have a good, solid conference like St. Mary's would be in that scenario because they're in a smaller conference. And it'd be better television.
I feel the same way about Nevada, I think. I don't know if the Mountain West has enough there for Nevada to get in if they don't win the tournament. So I'm kind of worried that Nevada's not going to get in, but everyone wants to see those teams play. I want to see the Martin twins and Kendall Stevens and all those guys in the tournament. But I'm just saying, and people can say what they want to, and you're probably going to dispute this, but I have the notion that a lot of times it's about who you play for, right, than who you actually play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there was
like Syracuse, Arizona are always going to get the benefit of the doubt over a Penn State, Nebraska, or Rutgers.
I hope that's not true. I can't dispute that necessarily. That was going on in Twitter today, that discussion. The only thing I would tell you is 2 years ago, one of the teams we missed in bracketology was Tulsa. And Tulsa had 4 quadrant ones or top 50 wins, whatever they were using at that time, and no one was even looking at Tulsa. Where it does meet what you're saying is we had Monmouth in, and they put Syracuse in over Monmouth. So maybe that was Tulsa over Monmouth, the way you look at it. So I would hope not, because again, I think there's some appeal if they really think about the true fans. And it sounds like you and I are on the same page here. I kind of want to see St. Mary's at an 11 or 12 go up against a 5. I want to see Nevada in. Some people have Nevada as a 6 or 7 right now. I don't see that criteria-wise. Fan-wise, I would say that they're up there. But criteria-wise, yeah, they're at the 9, 10, 11, and if they lose the tournament, they could possibly be knocked out. But, again, there's a team. Middle Tennessee needs to be in the tournament regardless of what happens. Loyola needs to be in the tournament regardless of what happens. And if you hold some slots, I don't think that's going to upset we had 64, 8, 9, 10 years ago before we went to 68. I don't think that – but anyway, we spent some time on that. Let's get back to the Big Ten tournament starting. Iowa won the first game of the tournament in New York City, and now Minnesota and Rutgers are playing. Give us your thoughts on who's going to win and maybe an upset special in the Big Ten. And I know who you want to win.
Yeah, no, they're kind of my upset special at the same time. I just think that people sleep on them. I do. I can tell you that, well, probably not anybody in the Big Ten, but that game that they have on Friday, potentially against Michigan, is not going to be super easy for Nebraska at all. I think it's going to be one of the top 5 teams that wins it. Penn State, Mike Watkins they don't know if he's going to play or not. And I can guarantee you one thing. If Penn State plays Ohio State, there's no way Ohio State's losing to them the 3rd time. It's not going to happen. Illinois out. They were a team that potentially for me could have been a sleeper because they have some talent. Minnesota's another one of those teams that if they can just figure it out, has enough talent to win the thing. I mean, I still can't understand what happened to. I mean, I know what happened to them, but I just don't know how they fall flat on their face like that. But Nebraska could be an upset special, a team that you probably should watch out for. They're awful good when they get rolling like they did the last 10, 11 minutes of the Indiana game and the way they played against Penn State. They're really hard to defend, and they're the only team that has beat Michigan by double digits. And probably Beeline's tenure, it seems like. So,
and I would say, and I'm not a Nebraska guy, but I would say they have the most to play for because they need to win a game or 2 at least to stay in the discussion. And if you're going to win a game or 2, you might as well go win all 3 and make sure there's no doubt. And when you come in 5th in the conference, you have a chance, or 4th in the conference. But here's the thing. I think that they need to have Michigan win tomorrow night.
They have to have Michigan win.
If Iowa wins, then that's not a quality tier 1 win if Nebraska beats Iowa. And now you're looking at, even if you get to the championship, you only had 1 win. And that's a biggie, Michigan State. So you can't discount it. But, boy, you want to pick up 1 or 2, and if not, pick up 3. Who's besides Nebraska, who do you think is the most likely team to win the Big Ten Conference?
Right now, Michigan or Michigan State. I mean, I don't know. I'm in the camp. I like Purdue too. I do. But the way Michigan plays and the way Beeline has them always ready to play at the end of the year, they're tough to beat. They are. Then this year they're really tough to beat because they defend really well this year, and they seem to have figured it all out. Before the end of the year, like the last maybe 2 weeks before that, they couldn't shoot free throws at all, and now they're starting to make their free throws. And then Wagner wasn't hitting shots, and now he's hitting shots. And Michigan State is just a matchup nightmare for everybody. Because when you have a 7'1" kid who can go out and pop threes from 80 feet away, it's kind of tough to defend them. And Nick Ward is 6'6", but looks like he can, I don't know. I don't know how Izzo will have them prepared. I don't think they can really improve their seeding much than what they already have. I don't think that they're going to get a 1 seed. It'd be awful tough. And Purdue can't get a 1 seed. They can probably stay in the 2 line. I don't see them moving off of that. So I don't know. It's going to be wide open between the 4. I don't see Ohio State winning it, though. I don't think they have enough.
Yeah. I think it's the top 5, seeds in this tournament, too. I wonder – I think Michigan State is really, really good. But, boy, they've kept teams in games. And being down 27 to Northwestern, and even when they played Indiana with a roster that's not extremely talented but plays hard, it was a 3 or 4 point game. I know it was in our building, but – they were down to Rutgers for a while too, and when is that going to sneak up and bite them?
My thing is that I was telling somebody today, Michigan State, I've seen them blow people away, and I know they can do it without breaking a sweat. The problem is they just haven't in the league. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I'll say this: they blew Nebraska out, and that's when and I don't think that. That was when that was the first game of the year in the Big Ten. They blew Nebraska out. And it's because I don't think Nebraska matches up real well with them. But they haven't really – Rutgers took them to double overtime both games. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And Purdue's interesting because I like the way they play. I like the way they guard. But athletically with Haas and that, I wonder rebounding and defensively if they can play 3 games in a row. How far they can go when they start, if they get in the tournament even and go to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and they run into some really uber talented teams. But I think this is the best Purdue team that we've seen in a long, long time.
If Purdue is making threes, right, they're impossible to beat.
I agree.
If Matthias and Carson Edwards are hitting shots, you're not going to beat them.
Have you ever seen a player like Carson Edwards? That kid can just get buckets.
He's really good, man. He's really, really good. I will say this, though, too. A team that I also want everyone to kind of be aware of, and this pains me to say this, is Wisconsin. Because they're starting to kind of figure it out, it looks like, a little bit.
I hope not.
Me too, but
I no offense. I have family up in Wisconsin and friends who are Wisconsin fans. I've seen enough of them for a while, and
they deserve to have a year off or 2. So it's just one of them things. I don't know if they'll be Maryland's another team. There's some talented teams in the Big Ten. Maryland's one of those teams too. That if they put it together, they can go on a run too, because they have a dude in the middle, Bruno Fernando. Man, that guy. Mm-hmm. Woo. And let's not forget about Indiana, because Johnson and Jawan Morgan can carry them too.
I tell you, I think Archie is the reason that they play well. I don't know if their guard play is good enough to get 3 games in a row. And when you got to play Haas and your center 6'8", that's just a bad match. You talk about bad matchups for Nebraska. Bad matchup for Indiana right now is Purdue.
Purdue's a bad matchup for anybody.
Yeah. So as a fan, I'm happy with Indiana this year because the roster is what it is. And then, it just takes some time when you have a new coach to get the guys in. Finishing 6th in the league was, I think, okay. But, yeah, I'd love to see a run. I just don't see it happening for the Hoosiers.
Right.
Let's go to the Big 12, who we could argue is the best conference in college basketball. Some people will always say the ACC, Big East, maybe even the SEC this year. But the Big 12 has some teams that have some special players, some great coaches, a lot of wins. Give us your take on who the favorite is, a couple teams that could win it, and maybe an upset special in the Big 12.
The favorite for the tournament is not Kansas because they never win the tournament ever because they do enough in the regular season. I like Texas Tech a lot. I like West Virginia's playing really well right now. One team that I'm not sold on at all and think they play their way out of the tournament is Oklahoma. I really do think they're going to play their way out of the tournament. K-State is another team that's intriguing to me. And TCU is another team that I don't really know. I don't know. They say they've won a lot of games against teams in the Big 12, but I don't really know if they impress me that much.
You know, I have that feeling about TCU from a seeding standpoint, too. They've been hovering 8, 9, 10 for us because you look at it and it's just kind of there. But then someone threw us something on Twitter to compare TCU and Michigan resume-wise, not eye test, not anything else, not by watching them. And TCU and Michigan are closer than most people would even suggest on the resume side. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards West Virginia. I thought they had a lull early and they had some player injuries and sicknesses and stuff, and it seems like they're back a little bit. I would watch for a little Baylor action, being hungry, trying to get off the bubble and maybe get into the tournament. Oklahoma has to win that last game at Iowa State and win at least one game in the tournament to feel safe. But boy, they have some good solid. They have 5 top 25 wins, and the young man, I don't know if you saw our Twitter today, but there's a young man in our committee that said was in love with Oklahoma because they have 5 top 25 wins, and he kept saying body of work. Bob kicked him out of the club, but
I understand that, but you can't. I mean, they just have looked so. You can't listen. If you want to play in the tournament, you can't get beat by 50 by anybody. I don't care. I'm sorry. If you want to play in the NCAA tournament, you cannot be getting beat by 50. And I will say this: Sagaba Konate for West Virginia is a game changer. You can't get to the rack on that kid. That kid, man,
he is strong, isn't he? I mean,
he's
thick
not even
and
that
strong.
big, but man, he's good. He's really, really good. Anyways, I like the Big 12, but I don't know.
Do you think they're the best conference?
Yeah, I do. I don't listen to the people that. I mean, I don't know. The ACC is still really good. Anytime you have Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse, teams like that in the conference, West Virginia, or anytime you have Duke, North Carolina, NC State, teams like that, that's a really good conference. And I would even rival to say that the Big East is a better conference than the Big 12. They're going to have 2 1 seeds. They're the only conference that has 2 1 seeds.
Yeah, I still think if someone gets beat early, a Villanova, that they might fall out of that, and I don't know. All right, let's talk a little bit about the NCAA tournament. What teams are you looking for that obviously we have your Nebraska Cornhuskers who you want to get in, but what other teams are there that are on the bubble, either in or out, that you think are going to make a run and get a 10, 11, 12 seed and be tough to handle?
St. Bonaventure, they got dudes, man. They have 3 dudes that are guards that are really good.
Jalen Adams
and Matt Mobley, and I don't remember what the other guy's name was, but they got dudes on that team. There's something special going on only in New York right now. Another team that I don't think enough people are giving credit to, they're solidly in, is Rhode Island. They're really good.
Yeah, I don't know where to seed them. I don't know where to seed them resume-wise, but, yeah, they're pretty good.
They don't have anybody really flashy, but, man, they're really good. And another team that you always can never count out, I wouldn't really count. I would like to say Cincinnati, but I don't really know I don't know Cincinnati much. The American's not very good this year at all, so I don't know how good they actually are. Gary Clark's really good.
Yeah, Cincinnati can guard. Their problem is putting points on the board, and when they run into a good team, that might be a team that makes a run.
Houston can make a run.
I agree. A team that everyone's kind of not sure about from the American Conference, going to be anywhere from a 6 to an 8 seed. Get the right matchups, get the right seeding thing could go. Who's your favorite for the NCAA championship right now if you had to pick? I know it's hard and it's an impossible question.
The field at this point? Well, if you could ask me if I could tell you how Michigan State was going to play them, because I've seen them just blow the doors off of people and with ease. I mean, when Michigan State gets lathered up and they get rolling, they put up 110 without sweating on anybody. Another team that I would never count out, North Carolina, especially the way they're playing right now. I mean, they did win the title last year, and they have most of those kids back. It seems like you can never count out Duke because they'll always be there every year.
They either go far or get knocked out early.
Yeah, and Michigan probably because they just always seem to get it going in a tournament. And I'm a huge John Calipari fan. I know that people are probably gonna might kill my mentions for this, but I love the guy. I know that he's not the most ethical coach in the world, allegedly, but to do what he's done with that many pros every year and just basically have roster turnover and to keep doing that, that's really hard to do. So don't ever count Kentucky out because when you have that many pros on your team, you can do anything.
I agree. I think this is about the most jumbled tournament field, and there's some negatives with all the top 1 and 2 seeds, and there might be a hot team that's a 5, 6, or 7 seed, top 25 like team that's the 23rd ranked. That would be your 6th seed that maybe gets hot and makes a run this year. Because it's just been, we looked at the 21 through 40 seeds, and you could throw them in a bucket and pick them out behind them and still probably be okay. There are all kinds of pros and cons all up and down that. So you mentioned something about ethics, and the FBI probe is going on in college basketball. A quick thought about the fallout from some of that. We're finding out some stories might not have been leaked correctly and true, and we are a country that supposedly is innocent until proven guilty. But I think that I was a little naive as a fan, knowing that stuff went on, but thinking that maybe it was less than half of the programs. I'm starting to think maybe that there's a little bit of that going on in a lot more programs. That's where I was naive about. What are your thoughts on the FBI and the agent shoe company issue?
I was surprised at some of the names that I saw on there, to be honest with you. Justin Patton, living in Nebraska, was a name that really shocked me. To be honest with you, Monte Morris was another name on there that really shocked me. And I have a couple of things on that. One, the NCAA needs to change that rule. That's stupid. You can't tell your parents what to do. Your parents can eat dinner with whoever they want to, especially if you don't know about it, like in Miles Bridges' case. I also have this. There was already the people that were out there that already thought that this happened anyway to every major program that won, because nobody can accept that maybe people actually do want to go to the schools that win all the time. So I don't know if it's going to change anything. I still don't think they're going to pay the players, even though I still have no issue if they do or don't. I mean, they're really not. I mean, they're student athletes, but they're more athlete than they are student anymore at this point. I mean, especially now, look at the Big Ten, for example, and the ACC, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're taking these kids out of school to go play a tournament that's 1,000 miles away from most of these schools for literally no reason at all because they want to make money. So at this point, the NCAA is making money off of their likenesses. I'm sounding like Jay Billis here, actually. I'm not trying to. The NCAA is making money off of their likenesses, and of course, the shoe companies are going to rep their guy. Why would they not want to? Yep. But the whole thing is I want people to also understand that this agent that they got this information from is notorious for making up stories. I'm not saying that they're all made up. I'm just saying that he has a reputation out there of being kind of a guy who tells some tall tales. For example, when he told everybody that he ran up a $60,000 Uber bill for Elfrid Payton, and Elfrid Payton had no idea what anybody was talking about. So he's kind of a little bit of an exaggerator, not saying that this isn't true, but I don't know how much of it is actually true or how much I'm sure that all of the players were truth. I don't know how much truth or how much is truth and how much is, kind of a little bit of truth.
Yeah.
Now it came out today with ESPN saying now that the report they had was wrong. It was Sean Miller who was talking to an agent about some money, but DeAndre Ayton was never mentioned. So that's another problem too, is that ESPN kind of needs to, before they report something, make sure that it's accurate before they ruin a kid's future.
Yeah, and there's a lot of hearsay too, because I heard I think it was another podcast and talking about it, and they had talked to some coaches, and they're like, we talk to people and handlers all the time, and if someone mentions money, we don't just simply say, hey, you're violating rules. We kind of hem and haw and get off the phone. And what this podcast said is, if you're a coach that gets involved with money and that, then you're going to talk money back. But if you're not a coach that is involved with money, you might just be polite enough to get off the phone and then not pursue either that player or that handler for a while. And just the fact that you were caught on a wiretap with someone mentioning money, and you even if you said, wow, that's a lot, I'm not sure we could do that, or something in a polite way, you got to be careful here in actually doing it versus that. And I do think the NCAA needs to change some rules and maybe set some limits on loans available for kids and stuff. But the bottom line is, no matter where you set the limit, it's always going to be breached by either agents, shoe companies, or boosters trying to get an upper hand for their school,
or the Patinos. That's a different conversation. But we could talk for hours on that family. But for one reason, I will say that I was rather surprised that there was some name not mentioned on there. But I don't know. I don't think see, the problem is with paying players, then you get this whole ball of wax of, well, how do you determine who gets paid what, and how do you determine who pays what, or how do you pay the bench players, or do you have a stipend for these players? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not thinking about that. I mean, do the top 100, do the 5-star recruits get more money, or the NBA just needs to do away with this rule and just let the kids go? Because that would solve a lot of problems. Like, DeAndre Ayton does not want to be in college. He made that perfectly well known at AAU basketball that he didn't care. I don't think Thomas Bryant ever really wanted to come to college. I don't think Jaren Jackson wanted to come to college. I know for a fact Brian Bowen doesn't care about being in college at all, clearly. So I just think that they need to let the rule go.
I think the NCAA would take a hit in talent if they did this, but we're going to talk a little baseball here, but the college baseball rule where go pro or you got to stay for a while. And that's not a free market situation. So I have a little issue with that. If you're good, you should be able to go at any time, but it seems to be working in football with an age limit. And it seems to be working in baseball that these kids know what they're getting into. They either sign a contract and go to the minor leagues right out of high school, or they come to college until they're draft eligible. And then you get kind of the best of both worlds. You miss out on some talent in the college game, which would be tough, but maybe there's a solution somewhere in there. But anyway, it's going to overshadow the tournament, I'm afraid, a little bit, but maybe not. Hopefully we'll have some good games.
Just so you know, I don't have too much time here left, so
okay,
we could talk a little bit of baseball, but I don't have too much time here left. So
all right, let's wrap it up. But I do want to say that you're a Red Sox fan. I'm a Cub fan, and I kind of follow the Red Sox secondary. And for our listeners, be looking for Bryan and myself to maybe talk a little baseball. So quick recap or quick forecast of your Red Sox.
But they picked up J.D. Martinez. That's helpful. Now, the question is what do they do with Mitch Moreland and Hanley Ramirez? Because not all three of those guys can play at the same time. Because if J.D. Martinez plays the outfield, that means that either Mookie Betts, Andrew Benintendi, or Jackie Bradley don't. So then one of them is going to DH. So it's kind of a rough predicament to have. But their pitching staff is better. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Craig Kimbrell, actually, as he had to go home today because he has a newborn baby who is very, very sick. And has had to have some open heart surgery, so he had to leave. And I just kind of wonder where his head will be at this year, understandably so. So the Yankees are going to be tough, but the Red Sox have won the division the last 2 years. The Red Sox have better pitching than the Yankees do. and the Yankees are going to strike out 300 times, maybe between 300 times by maybe 6 different guys are all going to strike out 300 more times. So I'm optimistic, but cautiously, I suppose. We'll see. I like what Alex Cora is doing in spring training, but again, the Red Sox farm system doesn't have much in it anymore because Dombrowski kind of is known for gutting a farm system, and that's what he did again. So we'll see what happens.
Well, look for Bryan and I to get together every so often during the Major League Baseball season, maybe even talk some college baseball as well. But we talked brackets today, conference tournaments, and some issues. We hope you enjoyed it. I thank you, Bryan, for coming on and sharing some time on a Wednesday evening. We look forward to hearing from you again. So for Sports Talk with Tonsoni, I'm your host, Bryan Tonsoni. Thanks for listening. Happy hoops watching.
Thanks, guys.